Good morning, everyone. Forest Yoga, Monday, October 26th. Here we go. Find yourself a way to be seated comfortably. I'm going to grab a bolster. Sometimes, as you know, if you come to my classes, sitting up onto something like so can be good. We're going to start with setting an intention. So if you like, you could take a long exhale, clearing your slate, and close your eyes or settle your eyes to one thing. And the intent we are working with this morning is the image of a triangle. And the base of the triangle is the physical body. So you could sense where your physical body is supported by whatever is underneath, and allow your sit bones to ground down. And then what one side of the triangle is the healing process. And for our purposes today, or the way I'm coming to it, of course it's wide open, is what it takes to process historical information in the cell tissue, in the energy body. What does it take to unravel those build-up tensions in order to be available and to be present in the body and in space and relationship ready to come through that journey? And then the other side of the triangle is the learning process. So often when we are then available, because we are grounded and regulated, the ability to change the brain, sometimes this fancy term of neuroplasticity. And one of the things that I fascinate upon and have really enjoyed and benefited from is how these processes co-occur and how they're similar and how they're different. And so I invite us all to ground and explore the relationship of the healing process and the learning process, centering the body in that inquiry. And so we'll be very structural today as we work, and somewhat specific. So starting by feeling into your rib cage, and if you like, you could do one hand to the sternum, one hand to the upper back, and allow yourself to sense that structure. And without forcing, allowing yourself to feel for stretching the rib cage 360 degrees, finding the organic rate of release. If you like using the process of mental noting, I'm noticing it's useful for me of unpleasant, there's distress in and around my sternum, in my heart. And so just unpleasant, rather than trying to not have that experience. And then perhaps pleasant, where I can feel the pleasant quality of being successful at starting to teach my class and have a breath in relative quiet. Separate the back teeth, sensing the skull bones in the environment. Sometimes imagining like a doll with an oversized head to give yourself an image to allow the release of these 26 skull bones that respirate. The plates move in a healthy cranial system. And then coming to the side ribs, and you can really give yourself some resistance, like stretching the tissues of the hands open, opening the carpal tunnel, and either same hand to same side or crossing the torso. See what feels better. And then you can give yourself whatever amount of pressure feels containing. Like a good amount of pressure for me feels like I can then expand my intercostal muscles into my hands. And exhaling, using my hands to help steady the quality of the tissues of the intercostal muscles. I'm going to move my shoulders away from my ears. Zoom is very useful for noticing those extra habits. And so learning, right? Noticing, becoming aware of what it is we do, mental cursing, tightening the shoulders, tightening the neck, and patiently knowing that awareness and not berating yourself when you become aware, instead celebrating that you noticed is the way for change to happen. And then we'll just take a minute here to talk about, we do this a lot on the back because it's a great way to use the floor, but see if you could study that seated, just giving yourself the cue of front rib softening. And what that does, I'll show it from the side. A lot of us tend to crunch up here in service of getting space, right? So even if it feels like it causes you to round, allow yourself to fill into the back bottom ribs, soften the front ribs down, just like you're on the floor. And like right now, I'm noticing like a no when I first attempt to do it because my adrenals and my kidneys are still like in a very activated state. So just accepting that that is so. Thank you for telling me you still think that you need to work. I can understand that. And waiting, just like you're waiting for someone you love, waiting for yourself. A couple of options here. If we can come into a seated straddle, I'm noticing for my particular back that sitting up on something is going to be good. And I'm going to come into some neck work. So for our purposes today, finding the balance between lifting the ribs, but also letting the sternum be a bit settled and the front ribs a bit settled, okay? And then really seeing where you can find actual sensation. For those of us with chronically tight necks, we can, or other places, you can do these moves and feel nothing because it's not because it's so open, it's because it's so congested. So play around with it. I've been finding front ribs down, letting this settle to really find my lateral neck here. And then from there, bringing the hand out of where I'm not going to mirror right now, right ear to right shoulder, palm up. And then use that to get that shoulder and shoulder down. So you can really find space in the left side of the neck and give it some time. If your neck is super tight, you could give it some support to titrate the amount of stretch And as always, a block is your friend. And so we're working with some warm up of pelvis, particularly inner leg line. I'm going to alternate with pointing and flexing to just get in there and say hello to the tissues in the legs, the lines of fascia. I'm going to keep the shoulder blade down the back, letting any yawns are great for the jaw. And just begin to explore underneath the collarbone here into the pec. Pec minor is one of the tighter muscles on many people. And just noticing the quality of tissue and energy. And we'll add in a jaw glide, lip slide here to our lateral flexion. Wetting the lips. Slide the lips like you are rubbing in lip balm. Any kind of exhales that help you to release the jaw. And finding a sort of thinking of a figure eight. Mine doesn't look anything like a figure eight because there's so much tension in my jaw, but going for that sort of infinity symbol, moving the jaw around. From here, help your head back up. If you need a little break from the straddle, come into Baddha Konasana, perhaps prop your Baddha Konasana, or just give yourself a break and then take it to the other side. So ground down, getting the front hip point and the back hip point as even. You can sort of exaggerate to feel into what your best guess of that is today. And then from there, softening front ribs towards back ribs, filling into that kidney area. Hello, neck. And then bringing left palm up, using that to move the shoulder and the shoulder blade down. Using your friends to bolster you. And then playing around to see what actually isolates the movement into the side of the neck. And then begin to take a walk, feeling into the connective tissue around the sternum. You can sort of pull on it a bit, teasing it out like you're combing it out. And on this side, making the shape of a yawn. And seeing if there's an actual yawn. Bonus points. Continuing to walk around underneath the collarbone, studying, learning about shoulder girdle. How does it connect to the rib cage, the pectoral muscles? Reaching through the inner legs, pointing and flexing. Couple more breaths here. And then giving yourself some time. Give the weight of your head to your hand. Feel the contact. Put your head back up. And then from there, either coming into Baddha Konasana, we've been sitting for a minute, so take anything that helps you neutralize that. You could also come into cross-legged. And what I want to work with today, let me take a minute here. I didn't get a chance to do this, so you might want to pause the video. We're going to do some squatting with some micro movements. So it either is going to be like blocks or a chair. If you have any hip tweakiness going on, like me, I've been using a chair to do this, but you can use blocks too. So thinking of something to bring the floor up to you. And we're gonna do some calf and ankle work, so please get a blanket or something you could roll up. Gotta get better about saying the gear at the beginning of class. Okay, so here we are, feet together, knees wide, feeling into the hips. And again, playing with front hip point and back hip point awareness. So you want your lumbar curve. You want to lift the ribs and keep them soft. And beginning to study here into your shoulders. So let's come into actually grabbing something you could use as a strap. And so starting with shoulders width distance. So ideally the shoulder girdle and particularly the shoulder blade has mobility. For many of us, it gets glued onto the back rib. So normal to have that. Just starting here, just sensing, do your shoulder blades move, isolating one and then the other, and starting to circle. Learning about the glenohumeral joint, the way the humerus lands into the socket, switching directions. And then giving yourself a moment, relaxing the arms down, breathing into the muscles underneath shoulder blades. And so often what also happens is the bottom tips of shoulder blades get stuck towards each other and stick out. So normal, and it gets harder to articulate. So we'll go into some shoulder shrugs to see what we can get into here. So shoulders up, shoulders straight back, squeeze the top tips of shoulder blades or aim for it. And then go ahead and drag down. Stage 2, breathe into middle shoulder blades. Feel for articulating middle shoulder blades. And then drag down. I find it useful to bend the elbows for this. Stage 3, inhale. Squeeze bottom tips of shoulder blades. So I'm sticking out my ribs to find that. So noticing using my ribs less is going to give me more information about the stickiness in my shoulder blades. Thank you very much. So just noticing what you do with your ribs to compensate for shoulder tightness. And then keep going, shoulders up, shoulders straight back, squeeze top tips of shoulder blades, drag down. Inhale, middle shoulder blades. Squeeze middle shoulder blades, drag down any amount. Stage 3, inhale. Exhale, squeeze shoulder blades at the bottom. Notice what you're doing with your hands. Do you have any struggle habits hanging around? And then take a moment. Breathing into upper back, thoracic spine. If we're in a fight or flight response, there can often be a rounding, normal. In noticing these lovely videos, I've noticed I have a lot of that, but that makes sense considering what I'm up to, holding 2 tiny humans. So from here, let's go ahead and give the shoulders another check-in. So go ahead and come up to stand, and then we'll move to some hip stuff. So beginning with coming into your Tadasana, so outer edges of the feet parallel, which is an internal rotation of the femur, internal rotation of the tibia, toes face forward. And then from there, playing with, my favorite habit is to jack up the back line. So I'm gonna soften that down to get front hip point and back hip point aligned. Lift my ribs without sticking them out. And then from here, this is a very common thing in yoga, interlace. And most of us with shoulder tightness will jut our ribs out in service of trying to stretch our shoulders. So what I'm going to ask us to do, unless you are genuinely open, which would not be me, I'm going to use this prop, face the hands forward start with shoulder and wrist aligned the best you can. And then hands are facing forward. So your humerus is in external rotation, right? Toes facing forward. Shoulders away from the ear. So perhaps you feel your shoulder blades move down, perhaps not.
And then from here, we do this a lot. Frontal hip points back over the ankles and then hinge. Use your hips as much as you can. Knees stay over ankles. And then just see, keeping the neck as relaxed as possible, the torso in one line. What is your range? So for many of you, it's gonna be easy to put your wrists over your shoulders. That ain't me. That may not be you. So not making meaning of where your limits are. Staying here, hips back. So you're getting into the posterior chain, getting into some hip work here as you're also working shoulders. You could totally let the head hang, or if that's too much pressure in your head, you could extend the spine forward. And then stay. If this is a lot in your shoulders, come a little wider. You can micro bend the elbows and that'll get you out of hyper. Extending the joints and more into the muscles. If you're shaking like crazy, I'm with you. Get weight into your heels, knees back. And then from here, get weight into your heels. Come up using the hip hinge, so you're not rounding up. Keep the lumbar curve. Give yourself a moment. Okay, we're gonna give the shoulders a break and stay with this hip stuff. So action. We're gonna come into a squat where we're focusing on keeping knees over ankles. Your knees might come forward a little or a lot, no problem, but the goal is to keep knees over ankles. So, like I said, for me, I've been finding this useful to use a chair. You may want to use blocks. So let's find our Tadasana. Aligning as best you can, hip, knee, and ankle. Outer edges of the feet parallel. Bring the hips, the frontal hip points back over the ankles, and then hinge forward like you're holding a ball. Filling into your side ribs. And then from there, hips back, hips back, hips back. Bring your hands onto whatever is supporting you, and then stay. See if you can get your hamstrings to tell you something. You can lift the toes up to get more weight in the heels and then bring them back down. And then from there, stand up, driving into the heels. So you're using that posterior chain. Keep the torso in one line. So you're using the hips and not the spine. Let's do that a couple more times. Frontal hip points back. Back, 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 back. I'm talking to myself because this is very hard for me because I have really tight lower legs. Hold your beach ball. Find your support, blocks or chair. Relax your neck and then stay. Feet are active. Notice any of your habits. Wrist tightness, neck tightness, eye tightness. Relax skull bones. And then drive through the heels. Try to use the hamstring strength rather than the quads. Let's go again. Frontal hip points, back, back, back. Broaden ribs. Find your support. And then breathe. Keep front ribs in towards back ribs, shoulders away from ears. Drive through the heels to come up. And then take a moment. Maybe take a little walk. Okay, let's do a little bit of footwork here. And we'll combine it with some shoulder work to use our time well. So plantar flexion. So those of you familiar with arrow lunge, this is like a mini arrow lunge drill. So coming to stretch the top of the foot and just notice if you're sickling a bit, reach through the big toe. So that's what that cue of lengthen the big toe is all about, is getting out of sickling in the foot. And then say hello to the tissues in your foot. And then just see where can you come into the most healing, or revisit our intent, healing way. What brings you back from unraveling historical residue. And makes you available to change. And then from here, you can, if that's enough on your foot, you can come out of it. I'm noticing I'm shooting this hip out to take the sensation away. So I'm going to knock that hip down, doing that by using the glute and the outer hip. And then from there, I'm going to take this hand and then just see, I'm going to turn back around. You can keep working on the top of the foot there. If it feels crampy, come out of it. And either low ribs, if you have a little bit higher, you want to get the arm as close to the ribs as you can. I just noticed my habit of looking down, which shortens the scalenes, makes me less available for present time basic goodness. So I'm going to cancel that. Good catch. And then gently release arm, hand, either stillness or movement. Stillness allows you to really feel the echo and the tissues respond, the energy body respond, and then sometimes the body just has a movement it knows it needs, right? Other side. So plantar flexion, take the top of the back foot. So I'm doing right side. If you drive or you are right side dominant, like most of this world, at least in close vicinity, this will feel very different. If you're taking that hip out to lessen or just habitually not traction the hip down, use the outer hip and the glute. Sensing front hip point and back hip point, ribs down. Keep breathing. Play with what small movements might be interesting for you. I noticed that pressing the top of my foot and then letting go starts to get into something interesting and useful. I've had a couple of broken bones on this foot, so it feels very clunky, and just normalizing the body and everything you find there, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Adding in the hands, so we'll start with internal rotation, thumb down, hand to low ribs or upper back as much as you can. Get the arm to the rib cage, and just notice if you stick the ribs out to not feel what's going on in the shoulder. Front knee tracks over the ankle. Shoulders down, shoulder blades down. Couple more breaths. Gently unwind the arm, unwind the foot. Stillness or movement. All right, we're going to do that squatting on one leg. So set it up. Frontal hip points over ankles, outer edges of the feet parallel to the long edge of the mat. And then from here, I'm going to lower the back. The ASIS is the front hip point, PSIS is the back hip point. So finding those as even as you can. And then from there, hips back, get weight into your heels. Get help from your support. Hovering one foot. And notice if you want to list out to the side to help track it back in. And then just give yourself some time here. Relax the neck. Let the hamstring fire because you're weighting in the heel. I'm going to get my knee back over my ankle and get my hip in. Couple more breaths here. And then drive through the heel, coming up on one leg. Let's do that 2 more times. And this side. Let's do 2 more on this side. So set it up, front hip points back, 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 back. Hold on to your supports, hover the foot. I'm gonna throw the top of the chair, trying to compensate. Hip in, weight into the heel, getting into the low glute and the hamstring. I notice I'm sticking that front foot forward, I'm gonna bring it back. I notice I'm doing a lot of compensation patterns. I'm throwing my ribs, I'm tightening my neck. Okay, drive through the heel, come up on one leg. Feel the echo of that movement, particularly into the fibers of the hamstring, perhaps the low glutes. I'm feeling an echo across this whole band, which is what I'm working with, some major old injuries lately. And probably some new ones. Okay, one more on this side. Hips back, hips back, hips back, hips back. Weight into the heels, get your support, hover. Let the posterior chain give you some information. If the hip is winging out, track it back down. And then drive through the heel to come up. So some hip strengthening, hopefully learning, hopefully healing moves. And so I'll face forward for this, just to give some more clarity about those cues. So Tadasana, front hips back, 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 back. I'm gonna hold my chair out to the side here. So already that hip wants to come out. I'm gonna do my best to get it back. Hovering this foot, hinging forward, get weight into the heel, come back to the tripod of, well, that was from an earlier class, but those of you who know what I mean, tripod of the foot, the heel is 1 point, ball of the foot, ball of the big toe, ball of the pinky toe, and then drive through the posterior chain and the outer hip. Let's do that 2 more times. Woo. Okay, outer edges of the feet parallel, hips back, hinge forward, ribs stay towards back ribs, get your supports. The hips swinging out, track it back. Give it a few breaths with the hand hovering, let all of that outer hip, back hip, keeping the knee back, gets you out of the quads and into the outer hip and hamstring, drive. Whew. One more. Frontal hips back, knees stay back. Get your support, stand onto one foot. Letting yourself drive into the heel, keep the base of the big toe, base of the baby toe grounded, and then drive to come up. All right. Let's do another little bit of shoulder work here. So taking the left hand behind the back, and then this time, to the best of your ability, flip your palm. Like so. And just feel, what does that do? So you have the internal rotation and then the external rotation. Thumb up and then thumb down. Taking a few breaths there, see how that gives you a different piece of information about the shoulder. And then you can let that slide gently down, and the arm reaches out and up. And then we'll do some flossing, palm goes down. You can either stay hanging out here or come back to hand behind the back and alternating between internal rotation and external rotation. And then give it a moment. We'll take that to the other side. it may need some clarification. So starting with what we did before, thumb facing down, internal rotation, and then flip the palm. If that doesn't work at all, just stay with what works. If the flip does not work for you, no problem. Arm slides down, reach out, palm is up. And then keep going. Ribs stay down, arms come down. And then alternate. Palm facing behind you. And palm facing towards you. And then give it a moment. Let's come into some calf stretches. So getting something to place the ball, the foot on, depending on what's going on, you may need more or less. So I'm gonna start with my right foot, which is gonna be my more congested side. So it can be more challenging, quite honestly, because it's so locked up that it feels blank until I find a sweet spot. So placing the ball of the foot, and then coming back to noticing if I'm jutting the hips out in order to avoid tension. Relaxing neck, ribs in. In the next couple of weeks, I've been doing some work with some of the balls. I'm going to be adding in that. So if you have a tennis ball or one of those yoga tune-up bodywork balls, you can grab that. And then just coming into revisiting this image of the body, the healing process, the learning process. Giving yourself a moment to switch sides and see what did that do. Opposite foot. And let go. Give yourself a minute. And so we're going to work back with the chair, adding on to the squatting, and we'll add in the Uddiyana with back traction. So many of you, I imagine, who are here are going to be familiar. And I'll break it down as much as possible. So knees over ankles as best as you can, choosing blocks or a chair or anything that works. Coming forward to start, using your imaginary beach ball to get that rib in action, shoulders down. And so you can keep hands on chair or shift into letting the weight bear onto the head of the quads. And sometimes I like to go a bit back and forth, and it'll give me information about numb places in all the layers of the abdominals. Feeling into the relationship between the front core line and the back core line. Take a deep breath in. Shoulders will hike up in this, no problem. Exhale everything out. Knees back. Keep the breath out. Belly back and up. Weight into the heels. When you're ready to breathe, relax the belly. Inhale, come forward. And you can move the chair at that point as much as you can, using the hip hinge and keeping the lumbar curve. Head is heavy or reaching forward. Inhale into flat back. And then exhale, let's step back into a plank. Press the ground away. For our purposes today, make one line with thighs and torso, so shoulder and hip girdle, lengthen through the big toes. And then feeling into what is going on in the shoulders here. Let's do some rhomboid push-ups here in our plank. So if you need more support, get the knees underneath the hips into a tabletop. Otherwise, let the shoulder blades come towards each other and then lift up between shoulder blades. And just noticing what you can learn here. Front ribs towards back ribs, feet and hands pressing the ground away. And then from there, lower all the way down. Reach back through each leg, plant the top of the foot, reach through the posterior chain. And then from there, let's do boat with hands on sit bones. So coming to that area we worked with in the squats, pressing into tops of feet, sensing, are you getting activation in the hamstring insertion and low glute? Lifting legs, shoulders, chest. 2 more breaths. And release. In your crocodile, either with hands stacked or forearms onto the ground, press the ground away and see what information that gives you about your shoulder girdle, how that talks to your lats. And then from there, hands under shoulders, shoulder blades down the back, press the ground away, and then come through your tabletop. Breathing into back, bottom, ribs, and then on exhale, sit bones move towards calves, ear moves towards shoulder. Sensing how the neck is connected to the shoulders, how the shoulders are connected to the hips. And then from there, come back through your tabletop. Press the ground away with the top of the foot and begin to hover the knee. Just hover, 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 hover. Hover left knee and right hand. And begin to point the heel towards the ceiling. On the left, take the right arm out into goalpost. And then take the left knee out into half frog. Only go as far as you can, that you can keep the hips square. Right arm out, palm down. Check out your struggle habits if they're coming online. And then reach forward, reach back. Stillness or movement. Press the ground away, get that articulation through the whole hand. Begin to hover the knee about an inch. Hover the left hand about an inch. And then from there, cactus arm on the left, half frog on the right, breathing. Feeling the outer hip coming online, the glutes. Notice what you're doing with your eyes. And then reaching forward, moving the thigh bone, kicking through the heel, making space, internal rotation from external rotation, thumb to the ceiling, so you're externally rotating. And then from there, coming to your tabletop. From here, let's come into dolphin. Elbows down, wrap around the triceps, and then either clasp the hands. This is a really benevolent way of working with tight shoulders. You can also do palms down. Shoulders away from the ears. Lift up between shoulder blades. For our purposes today, come as wide as the mat with your feet. Keep the knees very bent, and just like the action that we were doing in our squat, hips back, do that in your dolphin. Notice if you found the back line of the body. I just found so much more calf, hamstring, glute from that suggestion to myself. So notice what you can learn here. Either keep the knees bent or straighten the legs. Press the ground away. And then from there, gently place knees down. Sit yourself back into child's pose. So block under the head is very friendly for me. Perhaps something behind knees. Arms next to torso. Internally rotate, and you could hold the palms flat or anything that really accentuates that internal rotation. And then from there, coming back to tabletop. Let's do a down dog. From here, hands forward, press the ground away. Spin the bicep forward and then micro bend the elbows, which is going to keep you out of hyperextension into the muscles. And then you could do that same drill. Come up as wide as the yoga mat and give yourself that same cue. Hips back, hips back, hips back, hips back. And maybe you stay with bent knees. When you are ready, walk your feet to your hands. Find a forward bend where you're using your hip hinge and not in your lumbar spine, which means you're keeping the curve. The hip is way more competent in working with this action than the low back. And then from there, do that drill we often do. Press to get that hip back action. Hip back, press, press, press. Come up with a flat back. Give yourself a moment. Perhaps get a sip of water. Okay, so we're gonna work on swinging psoas and pelvic listing as the final section of what we're doing here. So either a wall or a chair is gonna be pretty useful, I would say. So swinging psoas. I'm coming closer to increase the chances that I won't wake up small people and that the recording will take. Excuse the cutoff. Please. Okay, so take your Tadasana, feet forward, transfer that foot forward. The tendency for many of us is to want to be somewhere like this. So you're internally rotating the thigh, the tibia, the ankle is as neutral as possible. And then stand on that, just like we got activated with the glute, the outer hip, as much as you can, and as if you were on the ground. So this foot is as even as possible, support or not. And start to give your suggestion of your leg as heavy. And you may want to come off for the purposes of getting started. Keep the pelvis as square as you can, ribs down. And notice what comes up as you let that leg get heavier, perhaps creating space in the hip joint. And then from here, the pelvic listing is to purposefully, just like you were standing, letting that hip sass out, and then drive through the heel, get weight into the heel, keep the knee over the ankle, come back. So It's a different strengthening move getting to the same area. So I'll show it from the side. Outer edge of the foot is parallel to the block. Keeping the knee over the ankle, sassing out the hip, and then driving through the heel. Doing one more. Whew. Find the hamstring, find the outer hip. Let this hip be heavy as you can, and then come down. Oh, I just threw my torso to the side to mitigate that. Remember, keeping ribs over hips. And then switch sides. Outer edge of the foot parallel to the long edge of the block. Front hip point and back hip point align, ribs in. What are you doing with your jaw and shoulders? Placing your mind into the head of the femur, resting in the pelvis, studying the architecture of the quads, the inner leg line, the hip flexors, the outer leg line, the back line, getting information. How does all of that come together to create the hip? What allows you to do this action? And then from there, sass out the hip and then drive through the heel. Use the outer hip, use the glute. Keep the knee back. Drive, get weight into the tripod of the foot, heel, ball the big toe, ball the baby toe. And then from there, find your Tadasana. We're going to do one more standing thing. So with or without the chair, we're going to do a standing figure 4, adding in that movement vocabulary. So hips back. As soon as I pour the standing leg weight, the hip wants to come out. So I'm using my outer hip and my glute. Get that down. Coming into sitting hips back, holding your imaginary ball to get the front ribs in. And you could use the chair or come into prayer hands. If it's interesting to you, you could begin to twist towards the lifted foot and either place the hand or the elbow on the arch of the foot. And if you knock the hip out, stay with the hip tucking under. Get weight into the heels, use the hamstring strength, and then come on up. Extend forward, roll the thigh in, make space. Shake it out. Tadasana legs. Front hip points over ankles. Pour the weight into the standing leg. Make any corrections. Ankle over thigh. Square the hips. Send the outer knee towards the ground. Dorsiflex the foot, toes towards shin. Use your imaginary ball to keep the front ribs in. Relax the neck. Coming into that home base press where you really articulate through the hands to find the whole tube of the torso. Use the outer hip, the glutes to stabilize. And then perhaps add your twist, elbow or hand to the foot. Unwind your twist, lengthen thigh bone forward. Tadasana. All right, let's come into some of our unwinds. So our famous swinging arms like ropes. Feel into how this allows you to get into that softening of the pecs that so many of us need. Feel into the tissue line, the fascia in the arms, bicep line. So this is all really beautiful lung and heart meridian, clearing, healing. Feel the scapular mobility or not as you're doing this. Make any variations to keep clearing out what we would call the prana vayu, the place of energy of connecting to receiving prana from the heart, moving it through the lungs and the arms. And let's take it side to side. I'm just kneeling to be on camera. Same thing. Let this come from the belly, and the arms are just ropes. Perhaps doing a little kidney tapping along the way. And then take a moment of taking, in my case, the sweetness of the flow that I feel as a result of that. Let's finish up with a twist. So come onto the back. Bring the knees. Actually, before you do that, shift the hips about 3 inches to the right. And this keeps the pelvis stacked right under the hips. Bring the lower body to the left. If the floor feels far, prop it up or bring something between the legs to stabilize the hips. Take the left hand somewhere to the ribs that you can keep coaching softness in the muscles of the intercostals, of the pectorals. Part of the healing process is defrosting all of the emotional upregulation that gets lodged in the ribcage muscles, and it takes time, and there needs to be a degree of safety and stability. So honoring that organic rate of release. Seeing what the best place for your gaze is. Coming back through center, shift the hips back, and then take them a few inches to the left. And then just feel how that small adjustment keeps the pelvis under the ribs. How does it change your twist? And notice, where else can you do that in your life and your practice? Resting your hands somewhere on the left torso. Softening internally so you can then take the most nourishing, down-regulating breath to prepare for Shavasana. And then placing the hand over the heart. Connecting to your heart and letting that guide you into Shavasana, setting up whatever would give you the most supported Shavasana. One thing I've been doing for myself lately to find anything that works is, because of shoulder tightness, I realized that, and just general body tightness, getting something under my head and something under each shoulder, like so, allows me to let go way more because my shoulders are not hanging in space, and I'm not thinking that I have to get them to the floor either, because I'm done working, I'm in Shavasana, right? Find wherever you want to be. And then this very advanced moment of let go. Wherever you are on that healing continuum, learning continuum, practicing
rest. Beginning to add some breath to your inhale. Taking yourself onto one side and then up to a seat. And coming to a seat, bringing your hands together if you like to close our time. Thank you so much for sharing your practice, and we will see you soon. Bye, everyone.